Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Andor Episode 4. An interesting episode. I feel very similar about this to the way I felt about the first three, especially now that this is like the first episode we sort of get on its own. It kind of highlights that, oh yeah, they're definitely doing these in what seems like groups of three, because this episode just sort of like ends at a seemingly random scene. Like there's no real, in my mind, like attempt to like have it be a cliffhanger or anything like that. It just feels like a part of the show has ended. Like it's just a break in the middle of a piece of content that probably shouldn't have a break. Again, I continue to maintain like I'm enjoying the show. I liked it. I just feel that I actually don't have that much to say about it. Like, from this episode, what am I meant to discuss, basically, other than it was nice, what's next? I'm excited for the next episode because I'm guessing we'll get into this heist that they kind of set up here. And in that sense, this episode is the setup episode for whatever this sort of secondary kind of arc is here in Andor. Like I said, with the first three, it's a case where the production, the acting, all that sort of technical side of things is quite strong with this show. But the actual core content of like what the story is, what aspects of Star Wars they're using, the characters, it's not the most interesting Star Wars to me. It's not that it's boring, it's just that, at least for me, I don't find this to be particularly unique or interesting because we've had many times before. We've explored early rebellion type stuff, the effects of the Empire. We've had the Imperial Security Bureau in other things. So I get this bit of a disconnect when I end these episodes. And then I see there's some of the reviews on like Reddit and Twitter of people being like, oh, this show's so amazing. It's so different than all other Star Wars. I'm absolutely loving it. And I'm kind of like, are we watching the same show? I get like it's good, but it's not like that level in my mind. And I think there's been some weirdness around like people very much kind of, bashing a little bit on like, say, Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett to bring this show up instead of just highlighting this show on its own merits. Because I think they're all good in different ways. And my main thing would be that I think the production level on Andor should just be present for most Star Wars shows. I don't think you have to only do it for Andor because the story of Andor is special or anything like that. You could have absolutely done this on other shows, and you probably should do more like this going forward. That production, like I said, the production kind of side of things is, to me, somewhat different than what the actual story is about. So let's get into some of the details here. What I'd say about this episode is that I think there was a lot of is on the Andor side of things especially, a lot of lengthy sort of like talking scenes that were good. Like you get to see the actors really getting to do quite a lot because they have quite a bit of dialogue, but accomplishing relatively little in that they arrive at the planet and just as they're about to kind of get off the ship, they have this conversation that is effectively, here's the mission I want you to do, are you going to do it? And eventually we get to Andor sort of roughly agreeing to it. There's a little bit of business that happens, and it's nice. I like Luthen. Andor is fine as our main character, but I don't feel incredibly connected to him just yet anyway, even though we have Rogue One, of course, as well. Then Luthen exits the ship to explain to the leader of the rebel cell on this planet why they should bring Andor on board. And he is aware going in there's going to be an argument. There is an argument. And I feel this is where it maybe gets a little bit repetitive. The whole other rebel cell group ends up just being a little bit repetitive when they go over the idea that, oh, last minute, you're bringing another guy on board. We need another guy, but it'll mess up the balance of the team. Can we trust him? Even though we're doing this suicide mission with not enough people, why are you bringing this new person on board? And sure, there's some mysterious stuff going on about like how exactly is Luthen connected to these people? why does his identity need to be kept out of this once like Luthen leaves and stuff like that. But the reality of it is that like it feels a little bit like Andor is a bit of a like passenger in this episode, where he doesn't really do all that much. It's just, hey, I saved you, now do this mission. Okay, wait, that's what the mission is? And basically we just end his side of the story with him preparing for the mission. They don't even do, in my mind, all that much with regards to characterizing the other characters to like bond with him more, to gain trust ahead of the mission. It just sort of like just happens where like, oh, they decide to be a little bit more reasonable and include him in things a little bit more. One of the guys gives him all the data ahead of time so he can learn it off. They explain the plan to him. So what the plan is, what they want Andor for, is to join this mission where they're going to steal the payroll for this sector for the Empire. Now, initially, I think Andor interprets this as like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll sneak in and out of like an Imperial administrative facility. But then it gets revealed that it's actually like in an armory, and it's quite heavily guarded and defended, and they have so few people as well is the other problem. And so he is doubting this the entire time through. But the plan ends up being that like, okay, they're going to use this box freighter to get out, which seems like a crazy idea to Andor because these things don't fly that well. They're not very quick, but they're going to use the sort of the history in a way, a celestial event to their advantage. This sort of meteorite shower thing, this kind of celestial thing that like happens every 3 years that will cause explosions to go off in the sky, will be what they use to sort of use to their advantage to get away. They said like, what was it, the timing of like after the eye closes or something like that. So my interpretation of this was that either they're going to get out, then the shower comes in and will prevent the TIE fighters from going, or they'll be aware of when it's going to end before, and they'll get the jump on them or something like that. We'll see what happens. We don't get the action in this episode, which, is fine, fair enough. But I will say, I didn't feel too strongly about any of these other new characters that got introduced. It just feels like, okay, here's another small rebel cell on this planet. This planet doesn't seem that interesting because it's another just kind of hilly, mountainous, foresty world, human focused almost completely, with just what felt like a very basic Empire backstory of like, they came 13 years ago, we're in an interesting spot in the galaxy, that's why they focus on us, and we're rebels. And that's just what it felt like. Some people might praise that for really strong world building, but I'm just kind of like, okay, you gave us some information about what otherwise seems like a very generic world. And that's most of that. I think Luthen, for me, probably is the most interesting character in the show at this point. Just because, of course, here, like, the acting performance, I think, stands out the most. And then we get to see this other side to him as well. I wish they'd maybe explained a little bit of this a little bit more, in that, like, okay, I guess he runs this, like, antique shop, and because of that he has a connection to Mon Mothma and the senators. There's obviously some history with him that I suppose we're eventually going to get about why he's so heavily involved. That will be interesting to see. But just that idea of like, otherwise he seems so like sort of practical from the first 3 episodes, and he's just immediately able to change into this like completely other character, which was effectively the brief lessons he was giving Andor about like, come up with a name, like embody the character type situation. And like, he is being quite harsh with some people, like he's having arguments with people. Even in the Mon Mothma scene, he's being critical of her because like, you can't secure the funds or whatever, but she's presenting the idea that the Empire is beginning to sort of like crack down more and more. There's more and more spies entering the Senate. They're kind of basically all over me, because I suppose the idea is that Mon Mothma in the Senate is trying to do the best that she can for the galaxy, without overly coming across as opposing what the Empire is trying to do. And because she's trying to be, I suppose, reasonable, she's being targeted, and that's limiting what she actually is able to do. Otherwise, she does seem like she's trying to get done what needs to be done. Again, with her, it's a very just like brief, in a way, appearance from her in terms of the setup for whatever her story is. We just get that highlighting that she's already connected to the whole rebellion stuff through Luthen and stuff from before, of course. And then otherwise she goes back home. We get to meet her husband for a little bit, and we find out that he has this kind of dinner prepared where they're going to get some important people over, including some of the people from the Senate that are basically Mon Mothma's enemies, and she really doesn't like this idea. So we'll see how that goes, and that, like, will we properly get into this kind of political Senate stuff? I think we know there are going to be scenes related to that. So will we see the dinner or skip past it? Either way, so somewhat interesting. But again, we didn't stay with Mon Mothma in the episode for that long, and I don't think she's the most like fascinating character, but she's one of the few sort of, in a way, characters in the show that we know like going in ahead of time. So that's that side of things. There's the Imperial Security Bureau stuff, where we obviously get to see sort of the head guy, and then the two other characters who are like, what her name is, Deidre, and then I forget what the other guy's name is. Is it Blevin, I think is what they said, if I remember correctly. Something along those lines. But he's been at this a little bit longer. She's, I think, just come in the last year. So she's sort of like the new recruit to this level of the ISB. So they seem to be highlighting with her that she's becoming used to sort of the way that they do things. And in her attempts to be a little bit ambitious, she's going against the way things are typically done. Even though she's kind of on the right path with the investigation she wants to take, it seems like it's maybe creating a little bit of friction with the other people, and they prefer things be easy rather than, you know, super, super well done. It all comes back to the fact that Andor stole this, you know, that kind of piece of equipment, and that's more in her area, even though it's in the other guy's sector. So she's trying to get like onto this mission to investigate that, but that's causing friction between those two. And even though she tries to explain the whole situation, that I believe this is a pattern. This is not just one incident of this piece of equipment being stolen. Stuff like this has happened before. I'm noticing patterns of specific things being stolen, things being targeted, and the idea seems to be that she is maybe one of the first Imperials really beginning to spot the idea of rebels becoming organized and planning things, and her warnings are getting ignored. So I guess we're going to have to see if that continues to happen, what she has to do to get the alert out that the rebels should be considered serious and dealt with in that way. So what will happen there? But again, a somewhat low-key plot point ultimately. Otherwise, we have the other guy basically come in on the planet that we were in the first 3 episodes. He basically replaces the corporate security with the Imperial. So they're going to be guarding that sector from here on out. What it means is most of the main cast from the first 3 episodes get fired, including Karn. And it seems like he's going to have a period where he doesn't know what to do now after this, losing this job. But I'm guessing he feels like an important enough character where he's going to have to come back into things. And I'm guessing he will want to investigate what they were investigating in the first place, Andor. So he'll come back into things. Will he join the Empire or just do things on his own? That'll be interesting to see. There's that sense of like, because they're not being super clear about what everyone's character arcs are, there's a little bit of a mystery about like what way will they actually go. But I think on the same side of things, like on the other side of things, you can say that, is that a good thing that they're being sort of slightly vague, or is it a bad thing that they're being too vague, and that you don't actually know that they're going to do more with this character, and it feels unclear rather than good setup. That's, I think, the line that this show is attempting to kind of straddle here, of like, how much should they tell you, how much should they leave you to figure out on your own. And so far I feel like they're maybe being a little bit too coy about a lot of the information that they have, and keeping things a little bit too kind of to themselves. And so I hope the information begins to come out a little bit clearer as the episodes progress. Otherwise, like I said, that's pretty much the episode. It's, like I said, I enjoy Andor, and I'm excited for the next episode because we'll get into a heist. But on a minute-to-minute basis, in terms of 42 minutes of content in this one, I really don't feel all that much happened, and that we saw like that much progress. And sure, I could maybe go back into it in a little bit more depth, analyze the specifics of exactly what was said to each character. But I think there's obviously still more that's going to come out as the arc continues. So it does make me feel that, like, yes, there was a few scenes where like it felt like it goes on a little bit long, considering how much that scene is meant to like accomplish. And so in other shows, you're almost begging that they were a little bit longer. Like when you see those episodes of like Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett that were like, oh, it's only 32 minutes long, can it not be a little bit longer? I almost feel like, I think you could have cut a few minutes out of this episode and it would have just flowed a little bit better. Or you could have just replaced some of those minutes with something else happening. And that's sort of the way I feel here, is that other shows, they're struggling to, like, cram in everything that they need to. And some of the episodes maybe feel a little overloaded at times, too fast-paced. The pacing almost feels a little too slow here. I wouldn't say boring, because I think that's very dismissive of everything. But I would say that it doesn't really feel like there's maybe as much going on right now. Or, 4 episodes in, it doesn't really come across incredibly clearly what we're doing on a more specific level. I get the general idea of what the series is trying to accomplish, but they're being, I think, needlessly kind of coy about some of the specifics. So they're my thoughts on Andor episode 4. Let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. Otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.